This is episode 84, Flying with a Baby and a Preschooler.
So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about flying with a baby and a preschooler. If you've been following along on the blog or the podcast for a while, you know that we've done tons of tips about flying with babies and toddlers. But until this point, we've never flown with two children. We've only had one at a time. We've only flown with one.
Which means that until now, we've pretty much always had two adults to a child, except for like a couple of times you flew with Lucy alone.
Yeah.
When I was like on a work trip or something.
Yeah.
And so that presents something that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And so for this first tip that we took as a family of 4, we flew to Hawaii. So in addition to it being like our first flight as a family of 4, it was also a very long flight.
It was a direct flight, fortunately.
Yeah, that was nice.
And so it was about 6 hours in the air. And we didn't just have us, I guess. Grandma was with us, but she was like up with the important people. And we were like back with the other people with babies.
Yeah, so we were on the same flight as my mom. But yeah, she was definitely way farther in front of us. She wasn't like sitting next to us and like helping us with the girls. But
like the first time we'd flown to Hawaii, there'd been like Lucy was the only kid.
Yeah.
And she was a lap child, and there were like 6 adults.
Yeah, we flew with my 2 brothers and their wives, and so there were 6 of us that we could easily pass the baby between. But this time it was nice because we were able to take Lucy or take Isla, and we were able to like actually have a destination to like walk to if we needed to be up and walking around. So that was nice.
Yeah, because that's always weird if you're just like walking around the airplane, but you don't have any reason to be walking around the airplane. I mean, people do it, but it's easier if you're like, I'm walking up here to see somebody.
Yeah. So we have 5 tips that we're going to talk about today, and these also go along with the blog post that I wrote that we will link in the show notes. But we just have 5 tips that kind of things that we did that made our flight successful. And I would say it was a very successful flight, both there and back. It went way better than I was expecting it to be.
Yeah, we didn't have any major trouble. In fact, we've had worse flights.
Yeah,
before,
for sure.
With just one kid.
Yeah. The first tip that we have is to make sure that you are communicating ahead of time. That's like with each other and with your kids, especially, if they're the preschooler and they're old enough to kind of know what's going on. Make sure that you're like talking about things and like setting those expectations so that everybody knows what's going on and kind of what to expect. So with Lucy, we talked a lot about how this was going to be a longer flight. We talked about, the things that she was going to do. It's been a while since she flew. So it was just, kind of going over the rules, going over what it's going to be like, and just reviewing that often in the weeks leading up to the flight. I think was helpful for her to kind of know exactly what. And since she'd flown before, she kind of knew what to expect, but it was good just to be reminded.
Yeah, I think it was helpful, even though it had been a while, but she already had flown. Yeah. And she's like pretended about flying a lot. Yeah. So she's like thought about the process of going through the airport many times because she loves to pretend that she's traveling. Mm-hmm. And so all of that was like not new to her, whereas if your first time flying with kids is with 2 kids, that would be a little bit different. But having everything kind of known and set up ahead of time is very helpful. And then we also talked a lot with each other, kind of as we were getting ready to get on the plane, about like who would be in charge of which kid, because before like we could both kind of be in charge of one kid, or we could each just kind of take turns. But this time we really did need one person to be dedicated to each child. Yeah. Also, we were talking, like, as we were on the plane about, if we needed to switch with somebody, or we talked a lot about what we needed and what we were going to be doing. Yeah. One thing I wish we had known better was whether or not and when they were going to do family boarding. Yeah. Because, well, some people want to get on early to get everything settled with their kids. Some people might want to get on later. Mm-hmm. They don't want to get on during family boarding because they don't want that to have their kids on the plane extra time. But having maybe known when it was going to happen would have been more helpful. And that varies by airline and maybe even by like flight. Yeah, so it might be good to talk to the attendants at the gate about that so that you kind of know and can be prepared for when you're going to be getting on. Yeah. But if you can do family boarding, I think that's helpful because normally as a family with lap children, you'll be put in the back of the plane. And so it's just easier to be able to walk straight to the back of the plane. And not be like bumping into people who are already sitting down. Yeah. And get your bags put up and everything without holding up the entire flight. And something that is helpful too, if you're able to, especially if you're on a full flight, if you are bringing carry-on luggage, if you talk to the flight attendant
on almost every flight. In Hawaii, they didn't do this though for some reason, but you can ask to check your bags, and they'll usually check your bags for free up at the desk before you get on the plane. And so you just take them down the jetway with your luggage tag, and then you pick them up at baggage claim at your destination. And that's super nice just because then you have less stuff that you're carrying through the airport. I know some people just check bags with kids. We usually just do carry-ons just to save money, but that is something that you can try to do that I think is worth it, especially if you're checking car seats anyways. Like, you have to go pick them up, and so you might as well gate check your bag and then not have to deal with getting it on the plane, getting it off the plane, and getting it through the airport at your destination. You just have to worry about getting it from your car or getting dropped off at the airport to the gate.
Yeah, the only exception to that would be if you had stuff in your bags that you needed during the flight. You can plan and pack the extra clothes and stuff that you need in your diaper bag and that kind of thing so that you could get around that. All right, for tip number 2, we have an object lesson. Isla has decided to join us on the podcast, so if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you can see her. If you're just listening to the audio, you will probably hear her.
Yes. So for our second tip is to tap into novelty. Flying isn't something we do like super often, and so every time we do it, it's still something like kind of new and exciting. So that's kind of something that we like to play up, especially with Lucy, is to talk about and make it an exciting thing because it's something that's out of the ordinary. Yeah. And so when we fly, Lucy gets to watch shows as much as she wants. At home, that's not something she gets to do. Yeah. And so she really looks forward to flights because she gets to watch movies and shows as much as she wants. But she actually is pretty good about regulating, and she does get bored with them, and so she wants to move on to other things.
But for that, it's good to have them preloaded on something and not to rely solely on the in-flight entertainment because you don't know what shows are going to be on the in-flight entertainment. And I feel like since COVID, in-flight entertainment has really
gone way down.
It's gone way down. There's a lot less of it. I don't know if that's COVID related or if they're just adjusting that based on the fact that everybody has mobile devices now, but sometimes it just doesn't even work. Like most of our flight on the way back, I think,
a lot of the screens
weren't working. Like mine didn't work at all. So don't be reliant on that. If you have like an iPad, that's probably better than a phone because it's easier kind of to give them and have them watch. We have like a special case on ours. And some libraries actually check out preloaded tablets with like some games, some videos, and some stories on them. So if you don't have one of your own, check your local library and see if you can check one of those out, and then you can kind of have that just ready to go. You don't have to worry about loading it with anything. Yeah.
So, and Lucy did switch between, her screen was working, so she was able to use the one on the back of her seat and also the iPad itself.
That is even more useful when you have 2 kids, right? Yeah. Like, she did watch shows before, but this time it was really like probably critical that she was able to watch shows some of the time, especially since part of that time people did need to sleep. Yeah. And so if one of us was playing baby, one of us needed to sleep, Lucy needs something to do if she wasn't sleeping.
So, and part of that too is she also has some headphones they're not traditional headphones, they're more like a headband, like a soft headband style, which is just a lot more comfortable for her to wear. And those are linked in the blog post as well. So if you're interested in looking at kind of what those look like, they are there. In addition to screens, that's kind of like the biggest thing and the thing that she looks forward to and knows about the most. But we also usually have a few other like special like toys and activities that are kind of like a travel only kind of thing that she doesn't usually get to use a lot at home, if at all. And some of those things are the Melissa and Doug Water Wow books. Last year we got her a digital boogie board, which is like an LCD drawing tablet that she really likes. When we were driving to Disneyland, she used that for the first time, and she would literally draw on it like for a solid hour. Yeah. And that kept her very entertained. So she really liked that, and it doesn't take up like any space at all. We also just do coloring books and crayons and stickers. I found that crayons on planes can be super messy because they roll. Yeah. And so we found these triangle crayons that are actually supposed to be helping like with their grip, but they're great for planes because they don't roll all over the tray table. So I've also linked those in the blog post as well.
Yeah, they're super helpful to have. And I'd say the boogie board, if you're really trying to pack really light, it's a really good thing just because it is so small and you don't have to have any other pieces for it.
And then with Isla, I mean, she was only, 3 months old? There's not really, like a ton of things you can do with a baby when they're that little. But since this was like a completely new experience for her, she was very entertained, like just looking around and just watching what was going on if she wasn't sleeping. Yep. So if you're flying with like super little babies or even older babies, just the fact that you're doing something new is exciting to them.
Yeah, and she just had a little trouble during takeoff, basically. Yeah. Not even during takeoff, just getting on the plane and taxiing was when she had some trouble. And then for the most part, she was pretty good. She slept quite a bit of it, which is the best. If you can get a baby to sleep, that's the best thing to do. You want to remember to have something for them to suck onto, like their binky or something, in case their ears pop, especially if you've never flown with them before and you don't know what kind of trouble they're going to have.
We also like to have carriers when we fly with babies, just because it gives our arms a rest, especially if they're sleeping, to not have to like actually hold them. But just know that with carriers, you're allowed to use them on the plane. You just can't have your baby in them during takeoff or landing. But once you're up in the air, you're fine to put them on and have your baby on you.
And chances are you're probably taking your carrier with you
Yeah.
to wherever you're going anyway. So it's just a good thing to have with you
Yep.
while you're on the plane. So tip number 3 is our old tried and true tip for basically all travel, which is snacks. This is good for any travel with children and any travel by yourself and any travel with your friends. Just bring snacks, because you never know what food situation is going to be like. Even if you think you know what it's going to be like, you don't know. Airports can close. Restaurants, especially nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
With limited
like
staffing.
so often the restaurant will be closed and you can't get anything, or you don't know what gate you're going to be at and there's nothing close to your gate, or on the flight they run out of something, right? They just won't have any goldfish left or something. So you need to be prepared with snacks, because any bad situation that you get in will only be exasperated by hunger.
Yes.
Right, on the part of you and on the part of your children. So snacks for the preschooler, and make sure that you have some way of feeding the baby.
Yeah.
Depending on how you go about feeding your baby.
So with Lucy, I just pack her a little lunchbox and just have some prepackaged snacks. Prepackaged goldfish or fruit snacks, fruit leather, raisins, applesauce pouches are all things that we take for her. We also always bring a little snack cup to put those prepackaged snacks into, so that she's not eating out of an open package, because almost every time she does that, she spills everywhere. So we just put them into a little snack cup so that they don't really spill.
So that's just one of those with like a pinwheel top to it,
Yeah.
so that nothing falls out of it, but
Yeah.
a little kid can still reach in and get them out.
And those are linked in the blog post as well. And then we also always bring a water bottle for her and for us as well. We all bring our water bottles. Make sure, though, that you bring it empty through security. Fill it up after you've gone through security before you get on your flight. And then once you're up in the air, unscrew the lid before you like open up the top to drink out of. Otherwise, you and all of your neighbors will get really wet from the pressure changes.
Which could be exciting. It has been exciting before.
Yes. So just make sure that you unscrew the top. It doesn't even have to be a full unscrew. Just unscrew it enough to let the air out, and then retwist it on. And then we also bring a sippy cup for Lucy to put any of the drinks that she gets from the flight attendant, so any of her juice or her soda or whatever. We just pour it into a sippy cup so that, again, it has a lid. It won't spill when she drops it.
The kid is going to want to have the juice, but you don't want it all over everything on your plane.
And then the other thing with babies, with Isla and with Lucy too, we formula feed them, and so we have to bring the formula, we have to bring the bottles, we have to bring the water for the bottles. Just know that stuff is totally fine to bring through security. Just know that it might take a little bit of extra time, because they will have to check every single bottle that has water in it. They'll have to check your canisters of formula. So it just will take a little bit of extra time, but it's never been a problem.
No.
That we've had, and especially with Lucy, we flew a lot with her.
Yeah.
And it was never an issue. Just try to keep those things in a separate bin, so that way they're just pulling that bin to look through, instead of pulling, the entire diaper bag and having to look through every single part. If you're able to just kind of pull those things out by themselves. And same with Lucy's lunchbox. I just put that in its own separate bin in case they need to check it. Sometimes they check it, but not every time they've had to check the lunchbox with the snacks in it.
Yeah, and just like going through security, just plan for how you are going to pull everything out, right? Because you got a baby and everything, and so you just want to get through it quickly. Security tends to be pretty nice when you're traveling with children. Yeah. Most of the places we've gone, traveling with children are pretty understanding and chill with it. They know that you're kind of in a difficult situation, and they're holding you up, but they just have to do their job and get it figured out. So works pretty well. We often will put all of the water just in one bottle. That's like an insulated bottle, so that it can stay warmer, and then they just have to check that one.
So our next tip is to let your kids wiggle as much as they can. Especially for us, it was important, since we were going on a really long flight, to make sure that Lucy and Isla were able to get their wiggles out beforehand. And something that we like to do is one of us will take Lucy and just kind of walk up and down the terminal, go on the moving sidewalks. Yeah. Just kind of go explore for a little bit, while the other person kind of has a home base with all the bags and with the baby. And then with the baby, if you're able to, we always try to find like a corner or a place that's a little bit out of the way. And I'll usually lay down a blanket and just let Isla roll around and crawl and wiggle and whatever she needs to do to get her wiggles out, just because I know that she'll be needing to be held and sitting for a long period of time. And with that, I usually make that like our airport blanket. I don't usually use that blanket again to like cover her or do anything like that, just because it can be journey.
It's hard to have them wiggle on the airplane, but you can walk like up and down the aisle and try and let them get out a little bit, especially if you're on an extra long flight.
Yes. So the last tip is to make a luggage plan. I talked about this a little bit already, but going into your flight, make sure that you know how you're getting your luggage where it needs to go. Decide if you're going to be checking bags, decide if you're going to be carrying them on, decide what you're going to be checking and when and how, and all of those things. If you are doing carry-ons, make sure you know who is going to be in charge of what. I know for us, since Ben and I both have our carry-ons and Lucy has her own ticket now, gets her own suitcase as well. So she and Isla usually share a suitcase, and then Ben and I each have our own. But that also means that we have 3 suitcases, only 2 adults who could actually like push them, and one of those adults needs to be holding a baby and helping get the preschooler to the right spot. How we've done it is, if I'm in charge of Isla, I will wear Isla, I'll push 1 suitcase, and then I'll have Lucy. I'll also be in charge of Lucy, getting her to the right spot. Lucy can carry her own backpack, which is helpful. And so I can get us to our seat where we need to be, and then Ben comes behind me with the other 2 suitcases, and then he gets them all up while I'm getting the girls in, and so...
It's just hard to vlog while you do
that.
And that makes it a little bit harder. I think the other thing with luggage is it's worth it to have good luggage.
Yeah.
Because we've had luggage break in an airport before, and that's
very start of a long
really
trip.
not helpful. And so now we have away carry-on bags, and they are not cheap.
No, but they are fantastic. They're
super
so good.
And because they can stand up and roll, or you can pull them and have them roll, like it allows you to have different like options and configurations, and I'm not worried about them breaking.
Yeah, when you have like when you're able to push them, you know when you have like cheap luggage and you pull up the handle and you're pushing your luggage through the airport, that it really like can wiggle a lot, but Aways have not done that at all.
And they don't sponsor us or anything. Then there are other brands that have really good luggage too. Those are just the ones that we use, and I think that it's really helpful to just, if you can, to invest in that just so you don't have a problem getting through the airport. Because if you have a broken bag in the airport while you have 2 kids with you or more kids, it's just going to be really difficult. And one thing you said was like Lucy had her own bag this time, right? If it's your first time flying with a non-lap child, right, a child with their own seat, you are going to have that other bag, which is really nice, but you also have to have a way of transporting it, so you just have to think about that.
Yeah, and Lucy's suitcase is not an away piece of luggage. You can tell. Like, you can definitely tell like a quality difference between them, but it also makes it so that's the one that gets pushed by itself often. Like, the person who's in charge of 2 pieces of luggage gets the away ones just because they're actually pretty easy, I think, to navigate 2 pieces of luggage, 2 pieces of the away luggage, than it is to navigate an away piece and Lucy's.
And if it is luggage that can stand up and roll, instead of having to be pulled,
with the 4 oscillating wheels,
that can be really helpful just because you can kind of push it while you have another bag, or Lucy can even push it herself. But just know it's going to take longer. Whatever you're used to doing, you're not going to be like running through the airport to catch your flight, so you need to plan accordingly because everything's just going to take longer when you have children with you.
Yep.
Okay, and that wraps up those tips for flying with a baby and a preschooler. I'm sure that we will come up with more things as we do more of this flights over the next year, and that takes us to Yellow Van Travel Plans, the part of the show where we talk about where we've been and where we're going. And we haven't been anywhere. We have not been anywhere in a long time. So we've been making plans for this year, particularly once we finish school.
Yes.
So once we finish school, then hopefully we will be able to do more traveling again, and we're making plans for some camping. We currently have some reservations. If you've been trying to camp, you know that camping reservations are hard to come by. So there are some places that we wanted to go that we've missed out on, even though we were right on time to try and get the reservations. You were right on time to try and get them. Weren't able to. But we know we're going to be taking a trip to South Dakota. We're going to take a trip out to Colorado to do some camping.
Going to Montana, Capitol Reef.
So there's going to be quite a bit of camping and other travel this summer. And then we're potentially looking at some stuff for maybe a graduation trip after we finish up school. So there will be more travel coming. Right now, we just have a lot to do to finish up everything. So we should both be done with our master's degrees this spring, and we're very much looking forward to that. So that's not much in the way of Yellow Van Travel Plans, but there's stuff coming. There's stuff coming. It should be good. And that will wrap up this episode of Yellow Van Travels, a family travel podcast. Make sure that you follow us online. You can find us on our blog at yellowvantravels.com and on Twitter at yellowvantravel.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at Yellow Van Travels. And if you were interested in this episode or found it helpful, if you could share it with your friends and family, that really helps our community grow. And also, if you could leave us a review wherever you're listening, that also helps others to find our podcast. Happy travels. Bye.
See ya.